If it wasn't for TikTok, I don't think I would have found my tribe. It amazes me how much people don't perceive. But when I began to understand, and I think when the children, my other siblings, began to talk about it, because what I don't know if your experience was like my experience in my family. You just soldier your way through things. Just concentrate extra harder, and you'll be okay. Or go in there and take a nap. That's kind of how we dealt with it because we didn't have the money to do what I'm doing now. But it surprises me how much people don't hear that and how people don't understand how distracting that sound is, and how even with, especially when you pile on top of that what I deal with, which is like a synesthesia, and also being an intuitive at the same time, dealing with human beings is very distracting. And it's taken a lot of work for me to be able to learn to concentrate beyond all the sounds, all of the stimulus, all of everything that is going on, in addition to the extra level. Like when you're dealing with people who are neurodivergent and intuitive, because you have the extra set of sensory capacity, meaning you're more, when you have like ADHD, you're more aware of patterns. But when you add the intuitiveness to it, and I realize I'm talking to a stranger on the internet, but I feel like bearing my soul. When you add on top of that being an intuitive, for me, sometimes I feel like I'm strangling on the data. And it's not until I met other neurodivergent people and they understood what I was saying, when I get a lot of data on people. And when I'm talking to them, having to concentrate beyond the sensory input, the data that I get from the pattern recognition, the weird funniosity of being an intuitive on top of that. It feels like a bit of that Tony Stark screen, when you see in the Iron Mans when he's got the data going down, and it's so dadgum distracting. And I'm surprised. I now have begun to understand, as an older person and as an adult, well in advanced, well aged, why I was so depressed as a kid, and how depression could set in because it was just so frustrating. Because who else, how do you explain this when you're a kid, when you don't even have a fully developed brain? And I would often become overwhelmed. And I spent a lot of my time just not wanting to be around people. I just couldn't take it. It's too much. It was too much. And people still don't understand that about me, how I can just be somewhat either mushed mouthed or, whew, it's just like, how do I not say exactly what I need to say when I really need to say it, which I really need to tell. Sometimes I feel like I need to tell people, hey, you suffer from a sense of insignificance. I can tell you had an early childhood wound. Obviously, you just had an argument with your husband. Uh, would you like to know that your grandmother never disproved of you? She just didn't understand. It's all the data that comes in at once. And it's taken TikTok for me to just find more people who understand it. And when I saw the string about electricity, I just, I knew that my father could hear it too. And being able to hear electricity is not an odd thing. You can just, electricity has a sound. Televisions have a sound. Both my parents are sensitive to it. I didn't really understand that's what it was, or why my mother would be like, it's not just the TV light, it's the sound of the television. And even with more and more expensive televisions, I've still found I can still hear it. And that's why I recommend to people, go out into nature. Like where I live now, it used to be so quiet. Weren't a lot of vehicles, wasn't a lot of noise. And the quiet of the country can be a very healing place. No, like just sit underneath the stars in the dark. And if you were trying to find some peace, try that. Because for people like us who can sense all this stuff, perceive all this stuff, and hear all this stuff, it can become very, very overwhelming, very draining, it's very tiring to live like this and to feel so often, so very much so, I can't say alone anymore. Cannot say alone anymore. Because once we all started communicating who and what we were and what we were experiencing, and you understood that there were a lot more people who were getting all of this data, and it didn't make you crazy, but it just made you perceptive, and it gave you the capacity to deduce, diagnose, and understand things that as an adult I've had to not explain to people what I perceive about them. And it often just makes me someone who chokes on the words because I'm like, oh my God, don't say that, don't say that, don't say don't say that. And even now, it's like right now, I have to go get some sleep because when I have to deal with other human beings and I cannot say what needs to be said because what you realize is that what you think needs to be said, sometimes you just don't need to tell people what you realize about them because who is it going to help? Especially us within who are intuitives. Like I can tell somebody like your time left on this earth is you should I've had to and it's the worst kind of thing to be able to make those kind of projections for people like you start having the conversations about making a will and who and unfortunately I have another family friend she is spot on. She's had to give those like I had to I don't and I'm sorry I'm strangling on my words even now I'm stumbling over my words. I try not to give people death notices or tell, because how do you tell people that stuff? Because pattern recognition can tell you things about people. So that's one layer. And then there's the other layers. But I'm mumbling, I'm rambling on because I am an old school yapper, which if you knew me in real life, I am not very talkative. I just am not a talkative person because most of the time when I'm around a group of people and you're getting all that data and it's nauseating and you're tired and you're trying to go about your life and you're trying to be your professional self, that I'm just like, I got to go somewhere else because I can't take this. Because for some people, yes, it is, they're crazy, they're schizophrenic. But for some of us, just being neurodivergent, having pattern recognition, like it's just too much. But I have to say, of all the things that I hate about TikTok, this is not one of them.